Today, drug overdose deaths are now the leading cause of injury death in the United States, and this is a direct result of opioids. Opioids are substances that act on opioid receptors to produce morphine-like effects. So opioids are most often used medically to relieve pain. However, as seen today with the current epidemic, more people are using it because they have formed an addiction to it. An incomplete but popular list of opioids include painkillers such as morphine, hydrocodone, and oxycodone. Some are sold under brand names such as Oxycontin, Percocet, Paladone, and Vicodin. And then there's the illegal drug heroin. Now, although opioids were used in some of history's earliest civilizations, I'm going to focus more on opioid use and abuse throughout America's history for the purpose of better understanding how the current opioid epidemic ever started. Carlo Flasha, a contributing writer of the Prospect Journal of International Affairs at UCSD, states that after morphine was created in 1817 in Germany, it was highly used in the upcoming wars as a way for pain relief. During the American Civil War alone, the Union Army used around 500,000 opium pills and 2.8 million ounces of opium tincture powder. In spite of opium's addictive nature, there was unfortunately no better substitute at the time. But after the Civil War is when opioid production and use became more of a common practice. Sonia Mohi, author of the 2016 CNN article, Opioid History, From Wonder Drug to Abuse Epidemic, writes out a near-complete timeline of the opioid use in America, which I will be interpreting. So opioid use was becoming even more popular when the production of heroin started in 1898. The Bayer Company produced this opioid on a commercial scale, and it was actually used as a cough suppressant. There was not much research done on this drug, though, and it was why it was so shocking to find out that opioid addicts discovered that heroin effects could be amplified by injecting it, and this soon became a big problem. So in 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act imposed a tax on those making, importing, and selling any drug that was derived from the opium or coca leaves. And by 1920, doctors were becoming aware of the highly addictive nature of opioids and tried their best to use other methods of treating patients for pain. And then just 4 years later, heroin became illegal. However, doctors were in a tough situation during World War II. Doctors had to treat severely injured soldiers, but knew from the effects of using it on soldiers during the previous wars and the new research done that they needed to find a non-addictive painkiller, and that was soon created by another pharmacist in Germany. So if the opioid drug was slowing down in America, how are we in an epidemic today? Well, drug use in the United States escalated after World War II in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. It actually escalated so much in the 70s that President Gerald Ford forced a study to be done on the problem. He recommended that less attention should be paid on marijuana and cocaine, and more attention should be paid on heroin. Other opioids came on the market in the 70s, such as Percocet and Vicodin. Despite doctors being long taught to avoid prescribing highly addictive painkillers to patients, an 11-line letter printed in the New England Journal of Medicine in January 1980 went against that popular thought. Authors Jane Porter and Dr. Herschel Jick stated that through their research and analysis of 11,882 patients who were treated with narcotics, quote, the development of addiction is rare in medical patients with no history of addiction, end quote. This letter really did change the outlook on prescribing painkillers, and patients with terminal illnesses started to be treated more and more with prescribed opioids. Some doctors were still skeptical, though, and other research studies did in fact show that some patients were ending up with an addiction after their treatment. But in the 90s, mindsets changed once again. People were starting to address pain as a vital sign, and there was a strong effort to do a better job of treating patients' pain. With more drugs coming on the market in the late 90s, such as Oxycontin, the number of painkiller prescriptions being filled in the U.S. pharmacies increased by 2 million to 3 million each year, according to a National Institute on Drug Abuse study. Between the years of 1995 and 1996, the number of prescriptions jumped by 8 million. Those numbers kept increasing throughout the years until August of 2010 rolled around. The makers of Oxycontin knew that their drug was being abused, so they released a new form of the drug that had an abuse deterrent. This would make it more difficult for addicts to crush up and abuse the drug by snorting or injecting it. However, addicts were still going to find a way to abuse it, and others who couldn't or got sick of trying moved on to the cheaper, easier to use, and highly available heroin, or any other opioid they could find. So all that brief background information kind of leads us to where we are today. An article titled Understanding the Epidemic on the Center for Disease Control website states that since 1999, opioid prescriptions have quadrupled, but ironically, there has been no increase in the amount of pain Americans have reported. This overabundance of prescriptions has led to extreme addiction, and this addiction has led to the statistic today that in America, 91 people die every day from an opioid overdose, and this includes prescription opioids as well as heroin. Seen recently in the news, which helps illustrate just how bad this issue has become, a county morgue in East Ohio became so full due to opioid-induced death that they had to use cold storage trailers outside their facility to store more incoming bodies. Many people feel as though not much is being done to solve what is happening, but there are efforts by the federal government being made to resolve this epidemic, but there are no sure signs that it is slowing down. I think the only way this epidemic will ever be resolved is if the federal government regulations become even more rigorous, but more so if pharmaceutical companies move their motives and mindsets from making more money to the health of their patients and fellow citizens of the United States.